We're going to be doing a custom epoxy job on this floor. Keep watching our video, we'll show you how we do that. Hey, what's up guys? It's Jeff Lepard from DoItAllSealing.com, and today we're going to be doing a custom epoxy job on a business floor. So what we're actually doing, we're using a product called environmental epoxy. So it's Enviro Epoxy. It's because it's environmentally friendly. What it is, it's 100% solids, it's not water-based, and it's not solvent-based. And also virtually there's no odor. So you actually don't need a mask when you're applying this. You can use it in any application, residential, commercial, industrial. Even comes with FDA approved. You can use it by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. You can use it in restaurants. It's completely safe, and it's a really good product. I've been using it for about 10 years. So depending on the application or custom floor that you're going to do, whether you're applying custom flake designs, clear coats, it varies from job to job, so it all depends on how many different steps you're going to take. In this particular case, it's about a 5-step process, with the first step being floor preparation. The floor actually was pretty much prepped for us. We just have to do some vacuuming before we start applying the epoxy. Step 2 would be the base coat, which we will start off now. And then if there's any kind of crack filling or something like that, you can do crack fillers, apply crack filling, any uneven surface. You can do that either before or after your base coat. Then you have your finishing coat. With that coat, we're going to be applying custom flakes that the client has picked. And then on the last stage, we're going to be doing a clear coat with a little bit of a texture grip. So keep watching our video, we're going to show you how we do that. The first thing we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and vacuum the floor just to make sure that it's clean and ready to go. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and vacuum just to make sure all the dirt and debris and dust is off the ground before we apply the base coat of epoxy. Okay guys, so now that the floor is clean and ready to have the application of epoxy, right now what we got to do is just mix part A and part B. Part A is the actual pigment of the epoxy itself. So in this case, it's the dark gray color. So we got to mix part B, which will actually start the curing process into the epoxy, and then you have about a 40-45 minute bucket life to work with the epoxy. So you basically, once you mix it, like you can't take a break, you can't stop, you have to apply it until it's finished, otherwise your product's going to go to waste. And one of the most important things I found through other contractors that are making mistakes is they're mixing it and they're in such a rush to get started. They do not a very good job mixing the epoxy, or they'll mix it for 1 or 2 minutes and then stop. You can't do that. You got to mix it at least 4 or 5 minutes. They recommend 5 minutes of mixing the epoxy. Therefore, the epoxy is thoroughly mixed, and you won't have any kind of problems with the job after that. So I'm just going to go ahead and pour part B into part A, and then we're going to use just my drill with I got a mixing bit on it, and I'm going to mix it for approximately 4 to 5 minutes. Make sure everything is in. Okay, now we're going to start mixing. Okay, so now that we mixed the epoxy for about 5 minutes, it's ready for application. So a little tip, instead of, obviously you have to do some cuts with a brush because you don't want to get it up against the wall, you don't want to miss anything with the roller because it doesn't quite get to the edge of the wall. So what you got to do is you have to do everything manually by hand. So you don't need anything fancy. You definitely don't want to use a very good brush because it's a one-time use. It's going to be thrown in the garbage after that. So any kind of a brush will do. I like to work out of a separate container, and the reason that is because a lot of contractors were dipping out of the good bucket of epoxy, and then what you're doing is you're doing your cuts with the brush, dipping it back in, but the brush is actually picking up some dirt, any kind of thing that you can't see, and it's mixing it into the good bucket of epoxy. So therefore, when you go to roll it on, you get those little bit of rocks and pieces. It makes your floor a little bit, inconsistent. It won't be as smooth. So by working out of a separate bucket, if there's going to be any kind of dirt or anything that we had missed, it's going to keep it along the walls at the sides, and when you roll your epoxy in the middle of the floor, it's going to be nice and clean, free of dirt and debris, and that's how you get the best kind of finish. So right now, I'm just going to go ahead and pour it into my little bucket here, just a little bit. Just like that. And I'm just going to go ahead and just start cutting around the wall where I'm actually going to first start my application with the roller. And you'll notice on the first coat, it seems like it's pretty thick. You really have to move the brush. It's not like paint. It's very dense. So it actually requires a little bit of a little bit of muscle there to move the epoxy on the first base coat. Just working my way around. That way your roller won't hit the side of the wall and make a big mess. Okay, so now that the cuts are done around the walls, we're just going to go ahead and start applying the roller with the epoxy. So here I just have a 13 millimeter roller. You can either use a 10 millimeter, 13 millimeter. They all work. It just depends on the smoothness of the floor. 10 or 13 is good. I'm using a 13 for today. So I'm just going to go ahead and pour the epoxy into the tray. So, also keep in mind when you're applying epoxy, the temperature does matter. You don't want to be applying it onto really cold floor. You don't want the room that you're applying epoxy in to be very cold. It has to be ideal temperature. The warmer the better. But if it could be closer to room temperature, and that would be more ideal. So. Get the roller soaked up a bit. After about a roll or so, it kind of works its way into the roller. So what you want to do is, we're not actually walking on it. Later future videos, I'll show you how we actually apply this epoxy using squeegee and back roll technique. But we're just using the roller today, so what you want to do is just do square sections at a time and overlap them. Just enough so that you can work and walk around, maneuver around the room. So what I'm doing, I'm just going to spread the epoxy in a little bit. Just work my way into our cuts. The first coat, it's very thick and dense, so you can see it's hard to work with right now. But it gets a little easier on the other coats. You gotta use a little bit of pressure to get the epoxy worked into the concrete, and then just back roll over the old spot just to move the epoxy around. Okay guys, so we're back on the second day. So the client has decided to fill in some of the saw cut cracks that they have in the work area. So before we start the second coat of epoxy, we're actually going to be doing an epoxy crack filler or patch filler. What it consists of is a component A, which is the actual epoxy, component B, which is the activator that's going to activate the epoxy hardening, and then component C is this, which we add into component A and component B after that's mixed, and this just thickens up the epoxy so that you can use a spatula, get it into grooves and cracks. So we're going to go ahead and start mixing component B into component A. Okay, so part B and part A are mixed together. We're going to go ahead and thicken it up to our desired viscosity using part C. So I'll probably use the whole bag of part C and probably some of C. We'll see how the viscosity of the epoxy is. Okay, so now the epoxy is mixed. We have a nice thick consistency. So we're just going to use this mixing stick just to drop the epoxy down where we want it. And just use the spatula. You can use different sizes, it doesn't really matter. And we're just going to go ahead and try to force the epoxy down into the saw cuts. That way it doesn't really sink. It's a bit tough to work with because it's pretty thick. You want to make sure you get all the epoxy as straight and flat as possible because it will show on the second coat if you don't. Just like that. That's it, so we're going to just let that dry and then we'll come back another day and do the second coat of epoxy with custom flakes, and we'll see you then on that one. Alright, so we're back to apply the second coat of epoxy. All the crack filling has been done, so now we're just going to go ahead and mix the second coat. The same color as the original color, dark gray, but on this coat we're actually going to be laying it down a little bit thicker. And we're going to be applying these custom flakes that the client has picked out. We got some white, we got some black, and we got some gold paint chips all mixed together. And that's going to be applied on top of the epoxy, and that's going to give it that texture effect. So right now we're just going to mix part A and part B to start the application of the second coat. Okay, so now the epoxy's mixed, we're going to go ahead and do the edging, cutting around the walls with the epoxy and the brush. Okay, so our cuts are done. We're just going to go ahead and start applying the second coat of epoxy using the roller. Using a 10mm roller. Now I'm just going to get a lot of the epoxy worked into the roller. For the first roll or so, it sort of works its way the epoxy works its way into the roller. But I'm going to be doing it nice and thick for this coat. So we're just going to do a nice little square. The roller's already starting to get a little bit dry just because it's the first roll. So I'm just going to go ahead and go over that again. So that the roller glides nice and easy over. We want lots of epoxy there. I'll roll one way, I'll roll the other. Okay, so now we've got a strip of second coat of epoxy down. We're going to go ahead and apply the custom colored flakes, paint flakes. So by doing this, we're just going to put them in our hand, get a handful, and just sprinkle them, almost like feeding the chickens, as one of my employees used to say in the past. So just want to really get your hand up high, sprinkle them so that the flakes fall and disperse. So we just want to fill in a certain amount of area without getting too close to the edge of the lid, because we still have to blend in the more epoxy to it. So there's usually two ways of doing this. One is by doing what we're doing now. I'm just going to be doing strip row by row, applying the flakes. Or there's a second option. Sometimes if you're applying epoxy with a squeegee, which I'll show you in another video, that you can actually walk over the epoxy once it's complete and then apply the flakes later. But for this video, we're just doing one section at a time. We're not walking on the epoxy for this video. So here we go. We're just going to go ahead and grab a handful, and we're just going to start feeding the chickens or spreading it. You can see you can go light, medium, heavy. The higher you throw it, the better it is. They disperse a little better. And what you want to do is keep the same consistency throughout the floor. Whatever you're doing on one section of the floor, you want to try to keep that consistency throughout the rest of the floor. Okay, so we're back for the final day of the epoxy application. On this application, we're going to be applying a clear coat over the two colors that we've just applied and the custom decorative flakes. So the clear coat is actually going to seal in the flakes and protect the floor. So first, we're just actually going to give the floor a blow with the gas-powered blower, just to get any kind of dirt and debris that's been left on the floor overnight, or any of the extra flakes that didn't adhere to the epoxy. So we're just going to go ahead and start up the blower and then give the floor a very quick blow. Okay, so the floor is now clean and ready to start mixing the clear coat application. Also, if you've noticed, I'm not actually wearing my running shoes. That's because I don't want any kind of dirt to touch the surface of the epoxy, because whatever touches the surface of the epoxy, we're going to clear coat over the dirt, and that's it. It's final. The dirt will be there forever. So either have a different pair of shoes, mostly what I actually do, but I didn't bring it this time, so if not, just go bare socks, and that's fine, so that you don't apply any dirt or any kind of dust to the floor. You want to keep it as clean as possible. Okay, so we're going to start mixing. Just like the colored epoxy, we have a component A and a component B. This is a clear coat, and also the client had requested that we apply a little bit of a texture grip to it. So we're going to be mixing this sand into the epoxy that's going to give it a slight grip. That way, just for safety concerns, when people are going to be working potentially at this flower shop, there's going to be a lot of water. So we want to just make sure safety first, that nobody slips and falls. So we're going to go ahead and start mixing right now. the clear coat epoxy doesn't seem to be as thick, so it actually mixes quite easily. You still have to thoroughly mix it to make sure proper mixing is done. Okay, so we're going to place the sand now into the epoxy. We've got 2 bags of sand per bucket we're going to use. We're just going to dump that right in there. There we go, there's one. And there's 2. It's very fine sand. And we're going to mix that thoroughly. Okay, so the clear coat is now mixed. Just like the first coat and the second coat, we have to take our brush and just do the edges along the walls. Okay, so the cuts are done. We're now going to, like the first and second coat, apply the clear coat with a roller, the same technique. Okay guys, so that's it. We just finished applying the clear coat, so we've got to continue off with the rest of the floor, and we can't actually stand on the floor, so we're just going to take this moment now to end the video, and just want to thank you for watching. If there's anything you'd like to see, leave a comment, like our video, share our video, and hit the subscribe button, and we look forward to hearing and seeing from you on the very next video. Thanks a lot from TubeBuddy.com, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.